So, ladies and gentlemen, today I thought I'd do something different and something that I have spoken previously about, yet more of in a joint session with other astrologers. Especially the only one who I really did with was Vaughn Paul Manley, which is the subject of children and the timing of having a child. And the reason why I'm making this now is because hey, I had my own lovely, beautiful daughter, and a lot of you have been asking, can you talk about childbirth and did the timing of your child was according to the planets? And yes, it was actually according to the planets. And so I'm going to discuss that, and I'm going to show you an example of how I came up with around in 2010 for a family friend about the timing of when their child could be born. And I was off by six months. So that was my bad. That was my fault. But it happened in that time period that I was kind of telling them. So, got pretty close. And so I'm going to show you that today as to how I saw it. Okay. And so first, obviously, if you do not know, what your planetary alignments are, and especially you're going to need to know your divisional chart here, which is saptamish chart, the D7 chart in Vedic astrology, which kind of like cut opens your fifth house and looks inside and sees what exactly is happening with your fifth house. What's happening when the child will come, will the child be male, female, how many children, all that good stuff. So for that, you want to check out the links here where you can get the full astrological report, including my books, Astrology, Conjunction, and Aspects of the Speed of Light. And second, I'm not going to discuss who may not have a child or what will block pregnancy of a child, because this is a very sensitive subject, especially for women. Very emotional and psychologically impacting subject, and I do not want to impact you psychologically. That's not my job. That's not my position. I'll let universe do this. And there are many astrologers who will straight up tell you, oh, you're not going to have any children. I'm sorry. And that's really, really bad karmically. This is why many of these astrologers live a very miserable life. They die prematurely because of the fact they suddenly now interfered with somebody's psyche, somebody's hopes. They kind of threw water water on the fire that they had inside about having kids, which is very, very dangerous line, because Vedic astrology is quite a not just a physical science, but also a transcendental spiritual science, and it's connected to different dimensions. It's connected to a lot of power. So you do not want to break those rules of doing something so stupid as telling somebody they'll die early, they'll never have kids, they'll never have wealth, they'll never have money, things like that. So I'm not going to discuss that. So let's talk about what are the things you need to look for when you're looking for timing of children. So the first thing you want to look when you're trying to assess a birth of a child is look at the fifth house from the ascendant. You want to see what planet is sitting in the fifth house, what planet is controlling the fifth house. And that's the number one thing you look for. But you want to also look at the same concept from the moon. Because in Vedic astrology, ascendant, moon, and the sun chart are all to be seen to funnel a final answer down. Especially, not even sun as much, but to be honest, I hardly ever used sun. Maybe I should. But mainly moon I always look for. Even when I do career consultation, I kind of look for things from the moon, from the ascendant all the time. It's just a natural thing because I have the moon chart right there on my software. So I'm just looking at it, and that just helps tremendously. Now, you want to look for this. What's fifth house is happening? Who's sitting in the fifth house? Where is the fifth lord placed? Because that will be another indication. And you want to see these things from ascendant and the moon. So you look for your fifth lord from ascendant and your moon. The next thing you want to look for is where the Putra Karka is placed. And who is the Putra Karka? Putrakarka is a planet with the fifth highest degree in your main birth chart. And it's a concept in Gemini you use with karakas. Okay, each planet becomes a certain type of a stira karaka, meaning that besides Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Rahu, and Ketu, the basic other planets become the significator of something. So the planet that controls the fifth highest degree in your horoscope becomes a Putrakarka. Putra meaning child, significator of child. So look for that because we're going to use that too. Then what you want to look for is what planetary time period you're going through, meaning mahadashas, because everybody's going through a certain time period in their life. They may be going through a 17-year period of Mercury, 19-year period of Saturn, 20-year period of Venus, whatever. You want to see what period you're going through. But this will not hinder the fact you may have or may not have children. I don't care if your mahadasha lord is placed in the 8th house. You can still have children. I don't care if your mahadasha lord is Rahu. You can still have children. I don't even care if your mahadasha lord is Ketu and you can still have children. But why is it that you want to know? Because when you go through a certain time period, let's say in your most initial stages, that's another thing I want to look for, is that the age of really having a child is between 18 and 42. Okay? 18 and 42, that's your basic road. You know, and of course, there are all sorts of people, cultures having kids at 13, 14, 50. This is just the basic thing for all the normal time periods, okay? So look for what mahadasha they're running between 18 and 42. Then what you do, you look at the mahadasha that they're going through, you make the chart into that mahadasha. You turn pretty much, if let's say your Venus is in the 8th house, what you do, you bring Venus into the ascendant and you look at all the planets from that perspective. The planetary signs will not change. It's just you're taking the entire chart and making whatever place that sign that Venus is placed in, that becomes the ascendant. Then what you can do, you look fifth from your mahadasha lord. What planet is controlling fifth from the mahadasha lord, if any? And what also you want to see is that if you're running through the mahadasha of your fifth house from your ascendant or moon, that's another time period that can signify birth of a child. So from your ascendant, if Mercury is in the fifth house, Mercury mahadasha is running from 20 to 37, that's a strong indication, okay, in this time period, they will have a child. But let's say you figure it out. Okay, I'm going through a mahadasha of this. Now what do I need to see? Well, then you're going to have to look at the placement of your fifth house, fifth lord. Whatever planet is ruling your fifth house, you want to look at that position. You want to look at the position of your mahadasha lord into the saptamsa chart, the D7 chart. And also you want to pay attention to what planet is in the ascendant of D7 chart, what planet is sitting in the fifth house of D7 chart. Because these planets in the divisional chart especially, who are ruling the ascendant or sitting in the fifth house, will indicate the sub-period time of your child to be born. And you want to, again, here's the thing, you want to again look from the ascendant and the moon, even in the divisional chart. You want to look from both places, who is ruling the fifth house. And once you do these two things from the birth chart and divisional chart, what do you do then? You're probably like, oh my God, I'm already confused. No. Here's the simple part. You want to see which combination are matching with the main birth chart. Are there any combination that are what I'm trying to say is that let's say if you have Mercury in the fifth house in your main birth chart, Mercury is in the fifth house in your saptamsa chart. That kind of gives a similar indication, a very strong clue of which sub-period a child may be born in. This is why you want to match patterns. And again, the first time you look at it, you may spend like 3 hours trying to see the combination. But once you get a practice of looking at charts, this is like a 10 to 15 minute process to really just see Not even that. I would say 5 minutes process just to see what patterns are similar. Okay. Then what do? After you have assessed what planet is ruling the fifth house, what planet is sitting in the fifth house, what mahadasha you're running into, what's happening in your dasha chart, the next thing you want to do is look at transits of Jupiter and Saturn. That's like one of the final steps. Because a mahadasha, an antradasha that you're running through must be supported by the transit of Jupiter and Saturn. And I've already made a video on this, so check it out on YouTube. Meaning that Jupiter and Saturn must aspect or be in a certain house for that event to happen. So for childbirth, fifth house is the most important. In this case, you want to see if Jupiter is going to be transiting and Saturn in their early transit, are they looking or sitting in the fifth house? Because that will be the triggering point for the birth to take place. So whether Saturn is in the fifth house and Jupiter's aspects it from the first house, 11th house, from the ninth house, that means both of them are somehow being involved in the fifth house as a transit planet. Or both of them could be aspecting. Saturn could be in the third house, Jupiter could be in the 11th house. Both are looking at the fifth house. That triggers the childbirth. Now, to really narrow it down, that okay, in this week or in this month, I see a child being born. You also want to see if the second Lord, fifth Lord, and the 11th Lord are transiting in each other's houses. And this is where it can get quite difficult, where, you want to see where second Lord is placed. Second Lord is transiting. They must transit in each other houses. Either all of three of them can be in the same house. It could be second, fifth, and 11th. And that can trigger that narrowed period of child to be born. Why? Because second house is family. A family consists of mom, dad, and children, siblings. Fifth house is obviously children. And 11th house is gain, hopes and wishes to come true. So are your hopes and wishes are coming true? And of what houses? Well, family and children. 11th house Lord is involved. So that means the gain of children will come. So once you start using these steps, you can see when the child's going to come. Then, another thing I want to go simultaneously to your mahadasha is the chara dasha. You also want to match the pattern to see, is your chara dasha also indicating child in this time period? If it's not indicating child in that time period, it may not happen. So mahadasha and chara dasha should complement each other for this to happen. So I know this is not making sense, but we're going to go to my screen and we're going to make sense of this. So let's go. All right, so if you guys can see this chart, this person was born as in Aquarius ascendant, okay? And that means the fifth house, this is the fifth house in Vedic astrology. It never changes. And that is controlled by the sign of Gemini, okay? And from the moon, remember I said to look for things from across the moon as well. So from the moon, what is the fifth house? Moon is Scorpio. So that means you make this a Scorpio ascendant. So fifth from the moon is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pisces ascendant. Pisces sign is fifth from the moon. So that means two of our indication planets for birth of a child is Jupiter and Mercury. Okay. Now, this person had their child in Venus, Saturn, Jupiter period that started from September 17, 2010 and ended on February 17th, 2011. And their child was born in the beginning of February. Okay. So we're going to see why this date. And I actually tell them the date of Venus, Mercury, Ketu. So I was kind of like 5 months ahead of when the child was born. Okay. So now they were going through Venus Mahadasha for since 1995. And so Venus is placed in the ninth house. Now, what does Venus has to do with birth of a child? Well, let's see. Venus rules the fourth house of home and family. Fourth house is home, but that's not really the indication. That's not a practical indication. Okay, Venus, more planet will be ruling some sort of a house in astrology. What I wanted to do is first I got the clue that okay, Jupiter and Mercury are both fifth from the ascendant and the moon. Next, Venus, fifth from Venus. What is fifth from Venus? Because remember, this is the mahadasha this person is running. So you make this into ascendant. So from Libra ascendant, you will have Mars, Rahu, 12th from the Venus. That means fifth from Venus is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aquarius sign, see that 11 Aquarius sign, becomes the becomes their the fifth house from Venus. That means Saturn is controlling their fifth house from the mahadasha lord. Okay, so I hope you guys are with me up to now. Now we're gonna go to the saptamsa chart, the divisional chart for children. So now when we look at this, the D7 saptamsa chart for children, we look at the ascendant. It's Taurus ascendant. Who rules the Taurus ascendant? Venus. Venus is currently this person's mahadasha lord. That means if a planet in a divisional chart, if the dasha that you're running also controls the ascendant of a divisional chart, something significant regarding that divisional chart will happen. And since this is a children's chart, that means this is the most strongest mahadasha for him to get children, because Venus rules the ascendant. But now I also told you to look at fifth from the ascendant in saptamsa chart. Fifth from ascendant is Mercury, Ketu and Mars in the sign of Virgo. That means Mercury is now becoming the fifth lord in saptamsa chart, and it becomes the fifth lord in the main birth chart, as you saw with the Gemini sign. That means Mercury now, for me, holds quite a significant time period for child to be born. But remember to look from the moon as well, not just the ascendant. So from moon, if moon was the ascendant, what's the fifth house? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Aquarius becomes the 10th house. So Aquarius is the fifth place from the moon. So that means Saturn is again becoming a indication of children. So in the first birth chart, as I talked about, you saw that Saturn ruled fifth from the mahadasha lord, and Saturn rules fifth from the moon here. So we'll give Saturn 2 points. Then Mercury is ruling the fifth house from the main birth chart and fifth house in the saptamsa chart. So Mercury gets 2 additional points. Now, we said that, hey, don't just go on this. You want to also go on the transits of Jupiter and Saturn. And in 2011, Jupiter was in Pisces. Saturn was in Virgo. And this triggered birth of their first son. So you see how looking into the main birth chart, looking into the saptamsa chart from the ascendant and from the moon kind of gave me the indication. Now when I chose this, I said Venus, Mercury and Ketu 2011. Because of the fact I was looking at Mercury and Ketu both, and I saw during the degrees of the planets, although they were in the same sign in the both time periods, the degree, I was actually going on a certain degree concept which did not work, which I'll discuss later in my book. But this is what made the childbirth happen. Now, another thing we forgot to mention is the Putrakarka. We also want to see Putrakarka through the eyes of Gemini. Like, what is Gemini indicating? So for this person, what is a Putrakarka? See, these are the Karakas of Gemini astrology. Only 7 Karakas. Rahu and Ketu never have Karakas. The Putrakarka, PK, the Putrakarka is what? Venus. That means Venus is having another significance regarding birth of a child. So now we're going to talk about the chara dasha time part, which is also very significant. Chara dashas, this person had their sun in Cancer, Virgo, chara dasha and antra chara dasha. That means they were going through the chara dasha of Cancer. And chara dashas, if you watch my video, you'll understand those are not planetary based mahadashas like Vimshotri mahadashas. Chara dashas are sign based time periods, meaning that this person was going through the time period of Cancer in their time period. Okay, so they were going through this time period of Cancer. So now how does this indicate the birth of a child? First, Cancer sign itself is a sign of motherhood. Shows, because it's ruled by moon, okay, so shows motherhood. That's one indication. Now let's fifth from the chara dasha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This small time period of like 7-8 months of this mahadasha and antra chara dasha, moon was sitting a fifth from Jupiter or fifth from the Cancer sign. Well, what is moon represents? Moon is a controller of Cancer, remember. So moon is also a significator of motherhood and being a parent. Nourishing things, nourishing a child. That's what a mother does. Mother nourishes a child. This is why this is important. So that's 2 points. The next thing, again, you want to see the transit of Jupiter and Saturn from this chara dasha. Jupiter was in Pisces, transiting the 2nd house. Saturn was in 8th house, transiting the sign of Virgo. Now, how does this aspect the 5th house? Well, in Parashara, Saturn would aspect the 5th house, right? But Jupiter is not aspecting 5th house. So how do these two had anything to do with the 5th house aspect or position? Well, this is where Gemini astrology aspects come into play. All cardinal signs or mutable signs, as you call them, all the cardinal signs will, I'm sorry, not cardinal, what am I saying? All the common signs, as they call in Vedic astrology, all the signs ruled by Mercury, Jupiter and Mercury will look at each other's houses in Gemini astrology. Okay? So all of these signs, Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini, will all be aspected by planets who are sitting in this sign in Gemini astrology. That means during the transit, when Jupiter was transiting here in 2011 and Saturn was transiting here in 2011, they both were looking at the 5th house, and that triggered the birth of their child. You see how beautifully you can detect birth of a person from this concept. This is the concept I use, but I just did not pay close enough attention, and I just gave 6-7 months ahead time period. But how beautifully you could have come very close to the birth of a child using this concept that I just showed you. And this is the process that happens redundantly. This is the process that I use, that I have, brought people who use this process. I've learned a lot of things from them, like Gemini part, like from Juan Paul Manley, man. I used to hear things about Gemini, but I never really gave a shit about it. I never really was into it. I was like, Gemini astrology, man, must be so complicated. Chara dashas, karakas, what is this? And then I get to find out, once you just learn these things from my video, Gemini astrology is actually far easier to interpret than Parashara. It's very easy. So once you combine these two things, see how beautifully you can do this. And obviously, once I write my book on childbirth in the next year or two, I will use like literally 20 examples that where I came close before I knew Gemini astrology and after I knew Gemini astrology. And because some people email me out all day long, and so all day long I'm like somehow doing my little research. So all of that is in there, and this process is just it's all about using just the basic things in astrology. You don't even need to use some yogas. When yogas come into play, remember, all the other things come into play in when you're trying to determine if somebody will have a child or not. I did not show you that here. I only showed you where you can funnel it down that, okay, I'm going to have a child in this time period. Now, if you were never meant to have a child and you funnel it down to the time period, it just pretty much shows that this was the best time period for you to conceive a child and have a child. And it also shows that if you do obviously certain medical procedures and you see that, okay, a couple of stupid astrologers told me I'll never have a kid. Okay, fine, cool. What these astrologers don't realize is that we're in the 21st century where people are having children through in vitro, surrogacy, planting, eggs and sperm in a microwave type machine and creating a baby. So when you hear astrologers say you will never have a child, just think about the fact that this astrologer is probably living in a time that we were living, that when the astrology was written, which was 5,000 years ago, even 200 years ago, it would have been legit. But for someone to say you will not have a child, they're wrong, because they're not looking at the fact that they can have a child through alternative means and methods. Like Rahu. Rahu shows something unusual. So with Rahu, you can have several things. You can adopt a child, have a C-section, in vitro, surrogacy, have the child made in microwave, time machine, whatever. But you got to see that if somebody said, I will never have a child, but yet your best time is coming within a year, go to a doctor, start doing your procedure, and that particular time period is when the pregnancy will trigger. Here's the thing. You may not have a child in that time period. Child will not come out. But that is actually a best time period for somebody to conceive as a mother or as a couple. So this way, that's the strongest time period where the life was supposed to take place. And if you conceive it in that time, that life will be intact with all the medication and all the technologies in the new place. Okay? So guys, this is enough of rambling from today. We're going to continue on with our 8th Lord series. And as always, if you haven't gotten your report, get it from this link here. Check out my websites and check out my books that have all this information in there. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.